Okay, let's get right into this. So basically, the Office of Inspector General releases what are called hot sheets, or at least that's the name that people give them. And they're press releases on behalf of the SSA that where they go ahead and they find criminals who are in some way benefiting from the Social Security Administration in an improper way. Now, when you loosely define beneficiary, that's somebody who gets the benefits from the SSA. The SSA will say a beneficiary is somebody who gets the right check at the right time for the right amount, right? That's their usual like rollout and spiel with it. But the reality is that there's a lot more beneficiaries out there who receive this money who are not supposed to. And they are still in some way, fashion, or form essentially a beneficiary. Now, if we go over here to the Office of Inspector General and we go to their website, I want to go to a case that we actually covered in a prior video, and then we're going to go through all new ones so you have an understanding as to like some of the people they're arresting. Now, please keep in mind also that DOGE, while it's in the news and we feel like we've had it for years with Elon Musk, it's not old. It hasn't been around that long. We're only hitting April 1st today. So the point is, when it comes to this news, these are not the people who are largely being arrested because of DOGE. These are people who are arrested from OIG, the Office of Inspector General, who, as a result of that, have concluded essentially, charges or are about to conclude charges against people who abuse the system. Here we go. March 26, 2025, a Puxatawny woman sentenced for Social Security fraud. So let's go into it. A resident of Puxatawny, Pennsylvania, like Puxatawny Phil, right? The little creature that tells us if we're going to take more time to get to summer. Pennsylvania was sentenced in federal court to 5 years of probation on her conviction of theft of government funds. Acting United States Attorney Troy Rivetti announced today, United States District Judge Stephanie L. Haynes imposed the sentence on Patty Merlo, 66. According to the information presented to the court from in and around May 2016 to and around January 22nd, Merlo embezzled, or Merlo, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, could be going a couple ways. Merlo or Merlaw embezzled and converted for her own use approximately $91,300 in Social Security payments to which she knew she was not entitled. She assisted United States Attorney Maureen Sheehan Balcon, prosecuted the case on behalf of the government. Acting United States Attorney Rivetti commended the Social Security Administration Office of Inspector General for the investigation leading to the successful prosecution of Merlo. All right, now that was a recent one. Let's go to some even more recent ones. March 28th, 2025. So we're talking like a couple of days ago. Okay. U.S. Attorney's Office, Western District of Missouri, St. Joseph, Michigan man was charged in federal indictment this week with aggravated identity theft and misuse of Social Security number. Romeo Perez Bravo, 42, has been charged with using a stolen identity to obtain employment and state-issued identification cards since 2009. The Social Security Administration's Office of the Inspector General received a referral from the St. Joseph, Missouri Police Department that a man had been fraudulently living and working under a Minnesota man's identity. And now, remember, you're going to be seeing a lot more of these claims now that Trump is in, because a lot of individuals who, were using, Social Security numbers of someone else, and sometimes they get rid of, they terminate the life of that other person and take over their identity. But anyways, Missouri Police Department, that man had been fraudulently living and working under Minnesota man's identity. SSA OIG identified him as Perez Bravo, who had been living in St. Joseph and working for local area employers under that identity for several years. The victim reported the identity theft when he began to receive unpaid income tax bills from the IRS. So it's good to know that the actual person is still alive. If convicted, Perez Bravo faces a mandatory 2-year prison sentence for identity theft and up to 5 years for misusing the Social Security number. The charges contained in this indictment are simply accusations and not evidence of guilt. Evidence supporting the charges must be presented to a federal trial jury whose duty is to determine guilt or innocence. But we know he's going to get hit with a pretty hard judicial hammer, because we know that other groups, other agencies had already basically done their due diligence in finding that he was abusing somebody else's Social Security number. And remember, over the next couple of months, what you're going to be seeing a lot of are individuals who are abusing either fraudulent Social Security numbers, people who were too old to be alive Social Security numbers of people who were alive that they then took over because they ended the life of that person, or just using a social security number that they find and think is available and go for it. So that has to do with a lot of the Biden era mass immigration without checkpoints kind of situation. The other thing that you're going to be seeing a lot of abuse checking on is basically people receiving benefits on behalf of other people that they're not supposed to. My understanding is that Elon through the DOGE is doing a lot of money checks and money resource reviews where they're going through and checking who's receiving the funds, who's using the funds, how are the funds being spent, what credit cards, what debit cards essentially are being used. They're following the money. And as a result, bottom line is they're kind of looking to see, okay, where's the fraud, where's the waste. Next one, Office of Inspector General, again, March 28th, 2025. All right, so let's look at this real quick. Pittsburgh, PA, a citizen of Honduras has been indicted by a federal grand jury in Pittsburgh on charges of violating federal immigration fraud laws. Acting United States Attorney Troy Rivetti announced today the 9-court indictment named Jose Antonio Meja Sarmiento, 66, as the sole defendant. According to the indictment, Meja Sarmiento was found in the Western District of Pennsylvania after being deported and removed from the United States 3 times between 1996 and 2016, including having been convicted of a felony on later occasion. The indictment further charges Meja Sarmiento with making false statements to the Social Security Administration on 4 different dates between May 2024 and February 2025 by possessing and using the identification of another person. And so just, guys, is a really important thing. As things start to develop and they get better at identification and they do multi-checks through your phone and stuff like that, don't let people use your social. Don't let people use your identification. I know that most of you would never do that, but I just want you to be aware the penalties are pretty bad. They're not good. They're not a happy place to be if you do that, all right? Next thing, the law provides for a maximum Social Security sentence of up to 10 years in prison, fine of up to $250,000 or both. Under the federal sentencing guidelines, the actual sentence imposed would be based upon the seriousness of the offenses and the prior criminal history of the defendant. Assistant United States Attorney Maureen Sheehan Balcon is prosecuting this case on behalf of the United States. Okay. All right. Bottom line is, let's get another one going. March 27th. Here we go. This was in New Jersey. So March 27th, New York man sentenced to 2 years in prison for laundering proceeds of fraudulent schemes. A New York man was sentenced to 2 years in prison for laundering the proceeds of elder fraud and computer fraud schemes, U.S. Attorney John Giordano announced. Hector Claveria, 51, of Elmhurst, New York, was sentenced by U.S. District Judge Esther Salas in New York Federal Court on March 26, 2025, following his guilty to count 2 of an indictment charging him with international money laundering. According to documents filed in this case, the statements made in court in early 2020, Claveria acted as money mule for a fraudulent scheme by picking up numerous packages that contained cash that he knew were proceeds of illegal activity. He then laundered some of this money in June 2020 by wiring $20,000 from his U.S. bank account to a foreign bank account. These funds were the proceeds of 2 fraudulent schemes. The first was an elder fraud scheme in which the perpetrators tricked elderly victims into believing that they owed money to various government agencies and companies, and then into sending payments to locations identified by the perpetrators. The second was a computer fraud scheme in which perpetrators tricked victims into believing that they owed money to a computer service company and then into sending payments to locations identified by the perpetrators, purportedly at the direction of the computer company. At the time Claveria wired the funds to a foreign account, he knew that the transfer was designated to conceal and disguise the nature of the funds. So imagine that. Imagine a whole group of people, tri-state area, figuring out how to steal elderly people's retirement benefits. All right, so there's additional prison term. Judge Saul sentenced Claveria to 3 years of supervised release. Claveria was also ordered to forfeit $20,000. U.S. Attorney Giordano credited Special Agent Social Security Administration of the Inspector General, New York Field Division, under the direction of acting Special Agent in Charge Bradley Parker. So, a lot of people think the disabled are just getting taken advantage. No, retired are scammed a lot. I've noticed that the retired tend to be spending money on things, trying to get the interest of an individual and losing money, trying to go ahead and buy something for somebody, and it turns out to be not what they thought on Temu. That happens. But the bottom line is that does seem to occur. Princess Diana Thank you for the $2 donation. Love the little April Fool's notification there. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Very cool. All right, next article I want to go through is basically the Office of Inspector General's a Mexican national indicted for passport and visa fraud after assuming the identity of a United States citizen over 40 years ago. Just to clarify, I said that over 40 years ago. So he really was that person for 40 plus years. So I mean, at some point, I don't know, you don't get a prize for that, but it's quite incredible. That's quite mind-boggling. All right, March 27th, 2025, Phoenix, Arizona. Enrique Ricardo Diaz Vasquez, 60, a Mexican national living in Arizona, was indicted by a federal grand jury in Phoenix on Tuesday with a passport and visa fraud. According to the criminal complaint in this case, an individual purporting to be Gene Edward Cadzorque first applied for and received a U.S. passport in 1986, submitting an Arizona license and U.S. birth certificate as supporting documentation. In subsequent years, the same individual filed multiple passport renewal applications using his previously issued passport to support his identity claim. In 2022, Cadzorque's application was flagged for investigation after agents discovered an obituary from the 1960s for a Gene Edward Cadzorque. So, I mean, this guy almost got away with this too, because if they didn't find that, they would have never known. Like, that's just mind-boggling. During the investigation, United States Diplomatic Security Service DSS agents learned that Gene Edward Cadzorque had died in 1966 at the age of 2 years old. They also learned that Cadzorque's name was linked in criminal databases to Enrique Ricardo Diaz Vasquez, a Mexican national. On March 7, 2025, Diaz Vasquez, purporting to be Gene Edward Cadzorque, arrived at the Western Passport Center for a regularly scheduled appointment regarding his most recent passport applications. After confirming that he had applied for the renewal under Cadzorque's name, Diaz Vasquez was arrested for passport and visa fraud. Spicy. They get you. They get you at some point. Let me tell you. During a post-arrest interview, so they brought the news in. Just kidding. Diaz Vasquez admitted his real name to be Enrique Ricardo Diaz Vasquez and his place of birth as Guadalajara, Mexico. Diaz Vasquez told law enforcement agents that he wanted to join the U.S. military and picked the name Gene Edward Cadzorque as his alias after visiting a cemetery. Diaz Vasquez successfully joined the military under Cadzorque's name, but then fled to Mexico after facing criminal charges for a homicide involving a 9-month-old infant in Tucson, Arizona. Diaz Vasquez was eventually deported from Mexico to the United States under the belief that he was a U.S. citizen. And he has been living under Cadzorque's name since that time. That's amazing. Oh, my goodness. They sent a Mexican back to the U.S. because they believed he was a U.S. citizen for over 40 years. So his own country, like, I mean, I don't, maybe they would. I don't see deporting this person working at this point. I mean, I guess they could send him back to Mexico, but at the same time, like, and then you've got the issue of what happened to that kid. That's a scary thing as well. That's just mind-boggling. Okay, that's just out there stuff. Passport and visa fraud carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. An indictment is simply a method by which a person is charged with criminal activity and raises no inference of guilt. An individual is presumed innocent until evidence is presented to a jury that establishes guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay? All right, so that one is just mind-blowing. Imagine living a lie for 40 years. It's actually more than 40 years. That's just a really tough thing to just swallow. Next one. Maryland man indicted for passport fraud and aggravated identity theft. Oh, by the way, you will see on my channel. Oh, also, please remember to hit that like button. Don't be afraid to just little tap on it. Give a little smack right there. Don't be afraid to hit the like button and subscribe. Also, you will find bots on my channel because of the amount of viewers I have, because of the amount of subscribers I have, etc. The bots will say, it's all lies, or the bots will say, show me the proof, blah, 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 blah. But these are direct hot sheets from the SSA's OIG website. But you will see those bots on my website. You'll even see people promoting other Social Security channels on my channel. So, it just is what it is. It comes with the popularity crowd. It's an unfortunate thing, but it does happen. But whatever, you know what I mean? It is what it is. People are going to do. I can't do that stuff because I would have to report to the Florida bar those disingenuous, shitty things that I would, I can't do that because I'm held to the standard of an attorney. But other people do that. So it is what it is. All right. March 27th, 2025, Baltimore. Today, a federal grand jury indicted Beautiful Life Allah. That's a name. Beautiful Life Allah, a.k.a. Tazell Miller, a.k.a. Tazell Miller, 65, of Gwynn Oak, Maryland, charging him with passport fraud, aggravated identity theft, false statements, and false representation of a social security number. And so what you should be getting from these videos, if you're like sitting back being like, I do get from the left side as an independent, I get people on the very left saying like, there's nothing wrong with Social Security Administration. It's all lies. It's all BS. Because never, there's no fraud, right? I get some of that from that, because they pump that stuff on like places like CNN, MSNBC. So they'll just believe like hardcore. And like that's the thing. If you guys watch Fox, check out CNN for a day. It's not going to kill you. If you watch CNN, check out Fox for a day. It's not going to kill you. You're going to get two hyper-spun media news outlets. Okay, it is what it is. Like but you'll see how massively different they are with what they produce. And you'll see that both sides are doing things that are like, oh my goodness, how did they get away with that? Oh my goodness. All right, here we go. So here's the deal. Kelly O'Hayes, U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, announces the indictment with David M. Richardson, Special Agent in Charge, U.S. Department of State's Diplomatic Security Service, Washington Field. All right, it's just a bunch of people. According to the indictment, Allah used someone else's social security number to submit a passport application, submitted a fraudulent custody order to apply for a passport for his minor child, and made false statements on passport applications from August 2022 through February of 2023. If convicted, Allah faces up to 10 years for passport fraud, a mandatory minimum sentence of 2 years for aggravated identity theft, up to 5 years for false statements, and up to 5 years for false representations of a social security number. Actual sentences for federal crimes are typically less than the maximum penalties. A federal district court judge determines sentencing after considering the U.S. sentencing guidelines and other statutory factors. An indictment is not a finding of guilt. Individuals charged for indictment are presumed innocent until proven guilty at a later criminal proceeding. So the bottom line, just to be clarifying with this, there's a lot of people abusing social security numbers that just aren't theirs, And one of the things that we're going to be seeing as a result of DOGE, whether you love Elon or you hate Elon, you're going to be seeing in the future, although the judges have stopped their access. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I've read some of the decisions from these judges, and some of them are definitely overreaching. Some of them are definitely advocating for things that a judge in a neutral position is not supposed to do. So look, back in, the earlier 2019 or 2020 era, I was watching decisions coming out. I was watching things happen, and I started to lose my faith in the judicial system, my faith in the Supreme Court, my faith in their ability to go ahead and from a neutral perspective, deliver things. And I got to be honest with you, it hasn't really improved at all. We've been seeing a lot of more rulings, both on the left and the right side, where we're seeing like advocates of a political agenda as opposed to advocates of the blind and definitive truth. And so from my perspective, I don't have the same respect for the judicial system that I used to. I still love it. I still respect it. I still respect the people in it. Even the ones that are, in my opinion, abusing some power against the United States, which is, I think, a terrible, terrible thing. Because, remember, when the judicial system loses the absolute trust of the American people, the problem you have is that is the bottom line stopgap. That's the end point. Like, if you're looking at signs while driving on a road, you've passed the yield sign, you've passed the stop sign, and now you're coming up to the cliff is here sign. And the cliff is here sign is the judicial division, because after that, it's just jail and prison. Right? That's you got jail and you got prison. So the point is, with going forward, I'm hoping the judicial system, in seeking the truth and the light with this stuff, can go ahead and make sure these individuals, face the punishment. But again, there's always politics in it. And politics aren't always from the left and the right. Sometimes politics are from the jails and the prisons. They don't have enough open spots. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough open areas where they can go. There's all these limitations on top of it where, somebody at the prison will reach out to the judge's office and say, hey, guys, we got a problem. We don't have enough. And that's when they start doing these privatized prisons, which Don't even get me started. Anyways, Dominican national pleads guilty to passport fraud and other offenses, March 27th, 2025. One of the amazing things about this is that America is no longer like the American dream. Like my generation, I know a lot of people who are moving out of the country to go live somewhere else that's much more beautiful, much cheaper, much more pleasant, food's higher quality, etc. Because America is basically just, when it comes to food, not a good deal. So the bottom line is, like, you're seeing a lot of people back in the day who did whatever they could to move into this country to become a part of America. But now you're seeing my generation, traditional Americans, right, that have lived here for a couple of generations or more. They're moving out of this country because there is no American dream to be had in the same way, because the major corporations buy up all the smaller and mid-sized corporations. And then all you have is these mega conglomerates basically doing capitalism, which is why we don't have capitalism. We have monopoly-based capitalism. That's where there's only a couple of companies that control everything. That's the reality with it. All right. Dominican national pleads guilty to passport fraud and other offenses, Boston. Dominican national residing in Leominster pleaded guilty yesterday in federal court in Boston to charges related to passport fraud and other offenses. Hector Eduardo Arias Meja, 44, pleaded guilty to aggravated identity theft and making a false statement in an application for a United States passport. U.S. District Court Judge Richard G. Stearns scheduled sentencing for May 7, 2025. In December 2023, Arias Mejia was indicted by a federal grand jury. So, he's done. They're going, jail time kind of gig. All right. Arias Meja, a citizen of the Dominican Republic, applied for the United States passport as a Massachusetts registry of motor vehicle real ID using the name and other biographical information of a resident of Puerto Rico. That surprises me because Massachusetts is very, very liberal. Now, I will say this. The most liberal state, in my opinion, where you're going to be seeing really, really weak voter laws, really, really weak identity laws, really, really weak license laws, that would be Washington. If you go, Washington, D.C., and also if you go to Washington, just north of California area, boy, oh boy, the stories I hear from people there when I represent them or go through things with them, it is wild. It is a kind of left I've never even understood. We don't even, in the state of Florida, we don't even know the level of far left that is Washington. You know what I mean? We don't even know that. It's a totally different level over there. But again, everybody makes fun of Florida for being backcountry hillbilly Dales on a UTV. And that's not inaccurate. We still have a lot of that, and we like it. It's quite fun to ride through the, data. But of course, the culture attributed to that is not one that a lot of people like nowadays. So, you have to give and take and understand. And people don't like that, and people also don't like that. So, and some people love it. Some people love the Washington, scene. All right, on February 25th, 2020, Arias Meja, again using the citizen's identity, applied for a United States passport at the Fall River Post Office. In support of the passport application, Arias Meja submitted the real ID he obtained in the citizen's name and the birth certificate in the citizen's name, and the passport was issued. Law enforcement became aware of Arias Meja's fraudulent acts when it investigated individuals who simultaneously received government benefits in Boston and Puerto Rico. When it was revealed that the same individual was receiving benefits in both places, the individual in Puerto Rico was interviewed, and it was determined that he was lawfully receiving benefits. Further investigation revealed that the person receiving benefits under the same name in Boston was Arias Meja, a Dominican national. Arias Meja has been using the Puerto Rico citizen's identity since at least 2011. Damn. So we're talking over 20 years here. That is, over 13-ish years, depending on what the month, the day was, whatever. The charge of making a false statement in an application for a United States passport provides for a sentence of up to 10 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and fine of $250,000. Yada, yada, yada. The investigation was conducted by Homeland Security Investigation. And then they think a bunch of people on here. All right, so the point is this. There's a lot of abuse with people trying to access what's considered to be the American dream. Now we don't need to worry about that because the American dream doesn't really exist. some people will say that are part of the MAGA side that Trump is going to recreate the American dream. And auditing the federal government is one of those steps to achieve that. Like when the federal government can't pass a budget review, when the American government is 36 trillion in debt, when the American budget is constantly eating up the future of our, younger generations, then yeah, some people have started to point out that the boomers were really aloof when it comes to voting, that allowed for all these massive changes that destroyed our economy, destroyed our infrastructure for manufacturing, etc. But another argument, which I thought was really good, was that boomers they rightfully trusted the news back in the day, and there were only so many types of news, and the news seemed more neutral. But as you can see behind the curtains of these politicians, they were manipulating people at extremely high levels. So as a result, we kind of ended up in this spot because of political manipulation. And when you start to think about it, what are the things that create the greatest amount of political manipulation? Well, you would go to two main places in America. Number one, you would go to Washington, D.C., and then number two, you would basically go to Hollywood, California. And the reason why is that Hollywood is the ultimate version of essentially a propaganda machine to create the identity and future of what people will participate in America. You want people to go into the Air Force, you make a Top Gun film. You want people to, appreciate, LGBTQ rights, you go ahead and make a video talking about how those individuals have been oppressed. So it's the ultimate propaganda machine. And that has been heavily used by Washington, D.C. to achieve the direction that politicians want for this country. The only kicker is we're kind of on our way headed towards military conflicts with trade war developing into a real war. And I don't know, if you study war, you'll see that most wars occur because there was initially a trade war, which then became a world war. So basically, transportation of goods for sale, almost honestly, every time except for like some of the earliest wars, that is almost the definitive factor for claiming that, basically we know what's coming to head into essentially a real world war. That and overvaluing things. When you see a massive overvaluation of items like we have right now, houses are overvalued, food is overvalued financially, although we sell crap food in America with way too much sugar and other chemicals in it. But the bottom line is we are heading into a world war scenario, and it's really not. This is the truth about it. It's really not a Ukraine-Russia thing. It's really not, an Israel versus the Middle East thing. What it really is a trade war that's going to end us up in a massive World War III battle with other nations. So it's going to be quite interesting. And then remember, if you go look at historic wars tend to be, in more the modern era, a rollout feature, right? So when you look at the dates and times, it's not like, boom, that's when the war starts. I mean, a lot of Americans look at World War II and they look at, basically what happened to Hawaii in Pearl Harbor, and they're like, that's when World War II started. That's not when World War II started. World War II had a whole lot going on before Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was just the nexus connection for getting us to do more on a direct personal. It was us saying on paper, okay, now we're going to go kick some butts. So, obviously you look at 9/11, the similar gig. But if you look at what came before 9/11 and how we were interacting with the Middle East before that, and then of course there's the issues with the lies and things like that occurred, and the weapons of mass destruction, but which is now becoming, if you look at the Iran sheets and what's happening in the Middle East with the countries there, many of them are getting nuclear weaponry. So the bottom line is there really is no safe way. We do have planes that fly up and down the border of the U.S. called nuke sniffers, but there is no safe way to live, as these more fragile, hyper-aggressive countries with more extreme versions of like life and death. There's no way to, because remember too, a leader of one of those countries in the Middle East is much more willing to see, the destruction of their own country for the benefit of their version of God, in the spectrum of what's going on. So you have to understand we're coming up to some more uncertain times, is the way I would put it. But again, I don't want you to be afraid. You do live in America. We have a massive military, so keep that in mind. All right, everybody, I will catch you all at the next video, which will be later tonight. We're going to be doing some additional videos, and I'll be going live to answer questions. Please remember to like and subscribe. We only have 226 likes. Let's get those likes up. Hit that like button. Also, please remember to go to Google and type in Disability Resolution Law Firm and throw some stars up there. You get to choose how many. I love waking up to them because it makes me kind of like get rolling, get going. With that said, I go live usually on Mondays and Thursdays. I fell asleep last night working at my desk, so we will be going live tonight to answer questions. And also, if you have a tough situation, you're not sure how to fix it or get an answer for it, I do private hour sessions where you can ask me your Social Security question. As the most viewed and subscribed to Disability Attorney in America, I'll walk you through what a solution should be for it. I'll catch you a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful day, a wonderful, wonderful night, and I will see you tonight. Thank you so much, and be kind to yourself. Be nice to everybody. I'll catch you later. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.